Princess Maud of Wales, more formally known as Princess Maud Charlotte Mary Victoria, was the third daughter and fifth child of Albert Edward, Prince of Wales, and Princess Alexandra of Denmark. Her father was the eldest son and heir of Queen Victoria, and eventually succeeded to the British throne as King Edward VII. Her mother, the beautiful and popular Alexandra, was the eldest daughter of King Christian IX of Denmark and Princess Louise of Hesse-Kassel. Maud was born on November 26, 1869, at her family's home of Marlborough House in London. The Prince and Princess of Wales went against tradition by not naming their youngest surviving child after any particular close relative. Maud was simply a variant of the old German name of Matilda, which had its roots at Anglo-Norman history. On the other hand, Maud's middle names were attributed to some of her female relatives. Charlotte was for her maternal great-grandmother, Princess Charlotte of Denmark, and Victoria was for her paternal grandmother, Queen Victoria. Maud's older siblings were Prince Albert Victor, Duke of Clarence and Avondale, King George V of the UK, Louise, Princess Royal and Duchess of Fife, and Princess Victoria. Maud and her sisters, who all inherited their mother's auburn hair, grew up in a sheltered and protected environment as a result of their possessive mother's smothering love and an obsessive longing for her daughters to remain dependent on her, as well as physically and emotionally close to her. Because of this controlling environment, Maud and her two older sisters, they were collectively called the Wales girls, had trouble socializing or relating to family outsiders. It also didn't help that the Prince and Princess of Wales gave their daughters only a limited education. Although Maud's older siblings called their childhood oppressive and stifled, Maud always looked back on her upbringing fondly and happily. She was certainly the rebellious child, for she was known for her tomboyish nature, her lively spirit, and her endless energy. The young Maud was even the first British princess to openly ride a bicycle, much to her dignified paternal grandmother's displeasure. She was her father's favourite child, and both loved to ride and play sports. Maud even earned the nickname Harry after her father's friend in the Royal Navy, an admiral who was particularly praised for his bravery during the Crimean War. Maud and her family often went to her mother's native Denmark to visit her maternal relatives at their annual family reunions, where she got to know her Danish cousins, aunts and uncles. Though she was close to her own parents and siblings, she was not very fond of her Danish family, particularly her first cousin Prince Carl of Denmark, the son of the future King Frederick VIII, and Princess Louise of Sweden. Carl, who was 3 years Maud's junior, was viewed by his British cousin as immature. Also, when the Wales family travelled to Copenhagen, they sometimes journeyed to Norway and the Mediterranean on cruises. When Maud was in her teenage years, she fell in love with the elder brother of her sister-in-law, Mary of Teck. Prince Francis of Teck, who was just 1 year Maud's junior, was fairly depleted in terms of money from his growing gambling debts, and although he could have benefited by marrying Maud because of her status, he had no interest in her and spurned her flirtations. Maud was almost enamoured with Grand Duke George of Russia, a grandson of Tsar Nicholas I, for a brief period of time, but nothing came of this young crush. But, surprisingly enough, Maud found love in her immature and daft Danish cousin, Prince Carl of Denmark, who had fallen in love with her in 1892. She eventually warmed up to him, finding him to be less childish than she believed, and the two bonded over a mutual love of bicycling. In 1895, Carl proposed to Maud, and she accepted. The couple knew that since Carl was unlikely to ever wear the Danish crown, since he was only the second son of his father, the two could live peacefully and quietly in Maud's home of England. However, there was some hesitation in both the British and Danish royal families regarding the union, since the two were so close in blood, and Carl's mother had desperately wanted him to marry Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands. But ultimately, Both Maud and Carl's families did agree to the wedding, and the couple was quickly married on July 22nd, 1896, in the private chapel of Buckingham Palace. Maud was 26 at the time of the wedding ceremony, while Carl was a few weeks shy of his 24th birthday. The couple's first few years of marriage were peaceful, just as Maud wanted. They stayed out of the spotlight in their honeymoon residence of Appleton House on the Sandringham estate, a country house Maud's father had given her as a wedding gift. Maud was so hesitant to leave England and her family that she and Carl were still residing in Appleton House 5 months after the wedding. Eventually, the newlyweds did pack up in December of 1896 for Carl's home of Denmark, as he had to perform his duties as an officer in the Danish Navy, where they settled down at the Bernstorff Palace in Gentofte, not too far from Copenhagen. But even here, Maud was not comfortable with her strange surroundings, and would travel back to England to visit her family as often as possible, especially when the bitter Danish winters rolled through. Less than 5 years after Maud married Prince Carl, her grandmother died in January of 1901, and her father was crowned as King Edward VII of the UK, making her the daughter of a sovereign. It was in England at Appleton House that Maud gave birth to her only child on July 2nd, 1903, a son named Prince Alexander. In June of 1905, the almost century-long union between the countries of Sweden and Norway was dissolved by the Norwegian Parliament, the Storting. Norway then began to look for suitable candidates for the newly independent Norwegian crown, and because of Prince Carl's descent from past Norwegian monarchs and his wife's high status in the British royal family, he became the great favourite for the throne. After a plebiscite in November, where 79% of the Norwegian people voted in favour of Carl, the Danish prince formally accepted the crown. Carl arrived in his new kingdom on November 25th, 1905, along with his wife and their 2-year-old son. 2 days later, he took the oath of succession and was crowned as King Haakon VII. Prince Alexander's name was changed to Olaf, and he became the crown prince and heir to the throne. Maud, now the Queen Consort of Norway at the age of 36, didn't change her name, but she and her husband were both crowned in a coronation ceremony on June 22nd, 1906, at the Nidaros Cathedral in Trondheim. Although Maud had never wanted to be a queen, and her home country of Britain always held a special place in her heart, she recognised her importance as her husband's consort to integrate her family into Norwegian culture and society. She made sure that she and her husband were photographed in Norwegian folk costumes and engaging in winter sports like skiing. Like her mother, she used clothes and jewellery as a tool to create a regal impression. Though Crown Prince Olav was raised as though he were a native Norwegian, Maud always remained firmly British and actually never became truly fluent in the Norwegian language. Queen Maud appeared to have a small and discreet public presence, but in all actuality, she had a firm grip over familial and ceremonial matters behind closed doors. The people loved her for her dignified persona, friendly nature, and sophistication when it came to high fashion and style. The warm yet bashful Maud disliked some of the luxuries of being queen, but she performed all her royal duties with grace, efficiency, and care. She always made sure that she visited England every year and would constantly stay in Appleton House during these annual trips. She was said to be a forceful and dominant person within the royal court, with a less visible public role, but overall, she was known as a humorous, friendly, and energetic woman to her family and close friends. Maud took a special interest in charities, especially those that involved animals and children, and supported Norwegian musicians and artists. During World War I, she founded the Dronningens Hjelpekomité, the Queen's Relief Committee, which was designed to help people suffering from very trying conditions caused by the war. She also became active in the fight for women's rights and promoted the cause for welfare of single women. Maud became the last surviving child of Edward VII and Alexandra of Denmark, when her final remaining sibling, King George V, died in January of 1936. Maud's last public appearance in Britain as at the coronation of her nephew, King George VI, in May of 1937 at Westminster Abbey. During the ceremony, the elderly Queen Consort of Norway sat with the Queen Dowager Mary of Teck and her niece, Mary, Princess Royal, in the official royal pew of the Abbey. In October of 1938, Maud came back to England for another one of her habitual visits, but during her stay at a London hotel, she fell ill and was taken to a nursing home where doctors had to perform an abdominal surgery on her on November 16th. Her husband hastened to England to be by his ailing wife's bedside. Although she lived through the operation, Maud suddenly and unexpectedly died of heart failure at her English home of Appleton House on November 20th, 1938, 6 days before her 69th birthday. Maud of Wales, the Queen Consort of Norway and a princess of the United Kingdom, was laid to rest in Akershus Castle in Oslo. Her husband survived her by almost 19 years before his own death on September 21st, 1957 at the age of 85, after which he was buried beside his wife.